Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm gonna try not to make this too long. I actually recorded I thought I recorded it once already. I recorded the audio, but I didn't record the video. So we're going but luckily for y'all, that first version was pretty long. So let's hope this time I keep it short and sweet. But I'll try to speed through the points a little bit better this time. So the thing I want to talk about in this video, it might be kind of boring, so again, I'll try to keep it short, but I think it's still pretty relevant. It's obviously super relevant. It's about job security. And for me, I'm starting to think job security doesn't exist, or at least under certain circumstances. Hear me out. First off, let's start off with defining what job security is. When we think of job security, we think of a job that we get into, pays well, insurance is good. Usually those extend to family. You're in your household, allows you to live life, whether the job itself includes travel, or if you and your family want to, you can travel. You know what I'm saying? Live life to an actual reasonable degree, all that stuff. And it has potential to grow, at least if assuming that's what you want. A silent factor in that I think the pandemic and just everything that we've been dealing with for the last handful of years, that we either have not taken into consideration, or that, at least from my personal perspective, something that people just have not voiced blatantly. How can I say, not economic compatibility, but like economic resistance is like the best way I can put it. Like, no matter what state the economy's in, this is a job that no matter what, or under the most circumstances, will thrive, or at the very least be stable, right? And it's not that has never been a thought to people. That's been a thought. It was something we didn't prioritize, because that's why you always had people who, like, when they want to do something for work, there's been that argument, especially us millennials and the millennial generation. We have been the poster children, or at least known as the generation of, like, let people do what they want to do for work. Who cares if it doesn't make enough money or a whole lot of money, and you won't be super rich off it. And where the case is, like, if you're passionate about it, then do it, and then the money will come. And I think to a degree that's true. The thing is, the pandemic proved that was a bad way to navigate the economy in one fell swoop, because as a result of the economy, or rather the pandemic, throwing out a lot of different jobs pretty much all at the same time, one of, if not the major thing that reared its kind of ugly head, was the tech wave, the tech boom. Now all of a sudden everybody wants to be some type of engineer. Not everybody wants to be a DevOps engineer. Not everybody wants to get into cloud computing. And we find out that we can do these things, and it's fine. I've ended up making that transition myself. I didn't do it like as a direct result of the tech boom. The tech boom for me was more, it provided a whole lot of information on the different sides of IT that I could go into. But by the time it came around, I was already working on my master's for it into IT management. So I didn't need the tech boom specifically to be like, oh, this is a place that can go for work and, stability and stuff. Once that happened, it opened a lot of people's eyes to the different layers of just tech, even if you were to go into marketing. But if you were doing something related to technology specifically, not only is it a moneymaker, but it was supposed to be stable. It was supposed to be, resistant to the economy. People were still, while some people were struggling, whether they were in jobs that required degrees or not, people in the tech world were advertising that they were still pulling high 5 to 6 figs, especially within the first few years in the industry, in whatever industry or in whatever, tech role. And for some, they were making it seem like they had to do little to none and they were pulling money. Yes, those that were pulling the overhiring thing, where they were 2 or 3 remote jobs and they were stacking up. And that's a whole issue in itself now. Companies are trying to nip that in the bud. You had all these things that popped up as a direct result of people prioritizing what they wanted to do, but not necessarily knowing what was going to be feasible in the economy by the time they left college, or what was, trending in the job market when they first, like, say, started college or things like that. And that led to a lot of people abandoning, whatever they got their degrees in, or whatever they initially pursued that was apparently a passion, and went for what was actually feasible. High 5 to 6 figure earning jobs that didn't require nearly as much physical and or mental labor. All that said, why do I think that job security, unless you're under certain circumstances, which I'll get to, doesn't really exist? People, or at least here's how I see it. I think what the pandemic has finally done, I don't think we understood before. What the pandemic has done, and this is actually one of the few good things about it, is more people, I think far more people today understand that companies are going to put themselves first under any circumstance. And again, being a millennial, I think we're the generation that was the main ones to push, like, I need to have my own company, this and that, da da da, because I don't want to work at 9 to 5. I want to do what someone else tells me all the time. I need to secure my own finances in the event that I do get fired or laid off from someone else's company, right? We were the poster children for that. So from a philosophical standpoint, per se, we were, pushing that whole narrative that these companies don't care about you. If you go on social media, you see people be like, hey, I had a coworker who was sweet. She was lovely. They were great at what they did, whatever the case is. She passed away. They put a job posting up the next day, next business day, if not the same day, clear their desk and everything. So we understood it from that point of like the philosophy of you not truly being secure. Like even when you think you're secure, you're not really secure. But when I say that these companies are always going to put themselves first, I think the thing many of us are still not quite getting, and that the pandemic has opened our eyes to, is the business side of that, where the companies literally do not have the workload and or the money to fuel having these workforces, the size of these huge sizes of staff members that they were able to do before, even to the point where it may have been redundant, because a lot of these companies had positions that, a lot of the layoff waves, a part of that, if not a huge chunk of it, was because these companies had overhired, tech companies mainly, had overhired because people caught on and were trying to apply and they got referred in and where the case is, and they were working 2 or 3 jobs remote, all that stuff. And eventually when things kind of calmed down a bit, these companies started being like, hey man, we got more people than we really need, hence the layoffs. So that happened, and then other people were back in the job market, and now they're 6 months, 12 months. I think I've seen a LinkedIn post, a woman saying she's officially hit 18 months without being able to find a job. It's very tough out here. But these companies, they can't afford to care because, and I think I've said this before, when you are an employee, you are a bill to the company. When you are interviewing for a job, what you're trying to do is you're trying to prove that you are a bill worth having. That's where the whole competitiveness of beating out the next person, to the point where you might even get a little shiesty with it, that's where that comes from. Because the company, if they can, they don't necessarily want you around either. If they were able to do what they needed to do without having to give money to you, they probably would more times than not. That's why the whole like family culture and things that people bring up, eventually we started seeing through and like, it's BS. Y'all just need people to do this and that for your company, to make them happy, and you give me a piece of the pie. Fine. We're here for that. We don't need the fairy tale no more. And just to avoid lingering on that, because I'm trying to go through this quickly, let's just actually springboard into the next part, because this kind of touches into it. A combination of offshoring and automation. And it's more so the automation part that kind of links the two, because especially with the rise of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, all that stuff, there was instantly that whole thing of like iRobot type thing. Like these things are going to start taking our jobs away from us. And a lot of people have kind of scoffed at that and was like, yeah, certain job titles might go away, but humans are always going to have work even if AI is in place. Because say if you have AI that's writing up code for applications or something like that, we still need, like, let's say back-end Python developers or SQL developers to double check that code, that know how to read it, that know how to write it, to make sure that it'll do what we actually need it to do. Because AI will make mistakes. A lot of them will, leverage that type of mindset of like, yeah, certain job titles might go or certain functions of your job might go, but AI is not going to take any jobs away, and it's an unrealistic fear to have. I don't know if we're deep enough to really confirm or deny that, so I'm gonna leave that be. But here's a part that I can speak to. Offshoring. The offshoring half of that is going to be a problem if it isn't already. Again, I told y'all, my mom, she works for a government contractor, essentially in cybersecurity on the GRC side. We both noticed more and more of our IT jobs are being sent overseas. When I was a contractor, I had to interact with technicians based in Morocco, Philippines, and Colombia mainly. I don't know if there are technicians anywhere else as far as where my employer has based them. Now, with my current accounts that I'm responsible for, I really only interact with technicians based in Philippines, not much anywhere else. But then you mix that with IT being shipped mainly or sent out mainly to India. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the past, when I've looked at job openings, and sometimes when I even just look at them now, when I'm writing these scripts and trying to make these videos, I am seeing more and more that these jobs are being sent over to India. And it just so happens that India is supposed to be, if not already, but I think it's not there yet. But within the next, at this point, probably 8 to 9 years, it was marked to be the IT capital of the world. So maybe probably around the time 2030 starts, if not a bit after that, India is supposed to be the IT capital of the world. So it makes sense that with these couple different things, that American-based companies are sending our jobs off, our IT jobs off to India primarily, but also other places, especially because stereotypically, Indian folks, at least Indian folks that like they make it a point to get a good education, like higher education and stuff like that. It's stereotypical for them to go for IT in particular. The same way you have the stereotype of, and hopefully this doesn't get me chipped. I don't know if you even need to worry about that, but you have the stereotypes of like black folks run entertainment. Not really. Jewish folks run, say, banks. Arabs, they run the oiling industry, supposedly. Indian folks are supposed to run tech. Latinos stereotypically run blue collar work mainly in construction. Those type of stereotypes obviously doesn't suit everybody, doesn't fit everybody, but that stereotype exists for a reason. And I've met other people who do technical or non-technical IT based work who say if they work on an international team, it almost has a good chunk of people based in India in it. So I think there's some truth to that. India is marked to be the IT capital of the world very soon, and more of our IT jobs are being sent over there. It makes it even harder, whether you're in cybersecurity, IT operations, IT service management, no matter where it is, it's getting harder to lock down jobs, not only because supposedly all these companies have openings that we're somehow still being denied from, but now many of them are being sent overseas. Even if they're not being sent to India, they're being sent somewhere else. Philippines is another place I've seen that's kind of common, depending on the company. A lot of these companies are doing that because they can pay offshore employees less than what they can pay us so that we can sustain the lifestyle that we have. Versus for them, offshore employees in different countries, especially if they're countries that are still developing, they don't need to be paid nearly as much for their money to stretch farther in their local environment. That's another angle to it that's like actually happening, and we can see it. It's happening more and more. You can check so many job listings, and I don't know about you guys, but it seems to be only a growing number of jobs that are leaving the states. The ones that claim that they are based in the states were being denied from, and the ones that maybe you're looking for that are mid to upper level jobs, they have to be based, or they are based outside of the states. And even if they're based outside of the states, it doesn't at least be like Canada. You know what I'm saying? Something that's a little decent. Because it's known that if you live in Jersey or New York, mainly New York, Canada's right there. Like there are people who live in the States, in New York, and then go to Canada for work on a daily basis and come back home, and vice versa for some Canadians. Because it's right there. The border's right there. It's not as far as people think. So it's not even something decent like that. Because I think, well, New York's already packed, so that would just make it worse. But it's not even something like that where if you lived along the northern border, well, the Canadian-American border, mainly in the Midwest to the Northeast area, it doesn't even allow that. Like, no, we're talking like you have to take a ship over there. You might have to move to the Philippines to entertain it. You might have to move to India to entertain it, and for a lot of people, that's just not an option. What does this ultimately boil down to? I would say it ultimately boils down to what's known as the gig economy, something that I'm just now finding out about. I'm just now hearing the term, but I think more and more of us have been doing it, whether we realize it or not. I've been open about majority of my work experience prior to this current position being as a contractor, where I did a 12-month contract. I did a 3-month contract one time. It was indefinite, but ended up being 3 months for me. And then I had another contract. My first big boy job ever after college was a contract that lasted 4 or 5 months before they offered me to stay full time. But by that time, I had secured a full-time position that moved me down to Dallas. I've done a good amount of contract work in my day, also freelance work. That seems to be the growing trend in America is we're stuck in an environment where it seems like more and more jobs, you can still make good money and pay your bills. You might work them for a year, 2 years, where the case may be. There's a level of uncertainty of, are you going to keep this job or stay in this company 5 years from now? Because initially, let's say the contract is only for a year. If you do well enough, and if money looks good on the company side of things, the company you're doing the work for, if everything checks out on their end and they like you and you're good at your job, then they might renew your contract for another year. They might bring you on full time and now you're actually secure. That might actually happen, but you don't know, because it's not your contract not being renewed is not solely based on your performance. We tend to look at people who, when they lose out on the job opportunity, they're let go, the contract wasn't renewed. We tend to attribute that to, oh, what'd you do wrong? If someone had a 1 to 2 year contract and was able to get through that entire contract without a problem, chances are it wasn't a performance issue. There was something else. And that's usually where the business side of it comes in. It just so happens that at the time when my contract was up, my contract wasn't going to be renewed. But luckily, with the help of my manager who trained me for my first year in the company, she referred me to multiple positions, and ultimately I ended up back in the company on a full-time capacity. Not everyone has the opportunity, so I thank and love her for that. I would say pretty much any other manager, any other situation, it wouldn't have worked out. And especially not only because the temp agency that I was going through, they weren't going to find me another contract to pivot to. It was also because the company I was doing the work for, they went through a layoff wave, like a legitimate layoff wave. So it wasn't even just I did something wrong or they just didn't want to keep me around. No, like they downsized. Like I heard about it as soon as I started back up with the company. There was a team that had like well over 20 people that by the time I came back, only maybe like a month or so after the fact, they had cut it to less than 5 people, something like that. Less than 10 for sure. A fraction of its overall size, and now people's workload is even crazier and all that stuff. It's not just a performance thing. Like these companies are struggling to find their footing and to maintain their workforce because they ultimately need to save money. If they don't save money, these companies are going to go under. And in a capitalistic society, as much as many of us, I think, either dislike it or are growing to dislike it the older we get, we need these companies to stick around so that we can get money to feed and boost the economy and circulate this money, which lets our economy thrive, which means other things can be built. Schools can be built. Hospitals can be built. Certain pieces of infrastructure in our society can be built up so that we can maintain being a first world country, so that we look attractive enough for other people to want to come here, stuff like that. So as much as many of us don't like capitalism, and I don't know if there's a solution to it, I don't know. But as much of us dislike it or we see the difficulties of it, at least in the current format, we need it, which means we need to understand that companies are always going to put themselves first. Not only in like a dehumanizing way, again, with like if someone passes away, but they put the job title back up. No, like if these companies made it a point to keep everybody out of trying to be nice, it's only a matter of time before this company sinks. And now everyone's out of a job. Versus they can get rid of relatively a few, but then, if you can get a job, things build back up and now they can bring people back in. I've had conversations with upper management where they don't give all the details, but like this is the type of stuff I can talk about with certain people, and they disclose this type of stuff. They confirm this type of stuff. Like these are the type of decisions that you would have to make. People think that's something that your company, like say if you did go on an entrepreneurship venture and you developed a company or two and they ended up being successful. If the economy goes bad, you're going to have to make that type of choice. Are you going to have to cut your HR team, your sales team, your engineering team, depending on what type of company you have? Like, you're going to have to make those decisions. It's not just companies being evil, and don't get me wrong, some companies are questionable. It's not just about companies being evil. It's what will allow the company to stay alive, and some people will be able to eat off of it versus we try to be the heroes of the situation by keeping everybody, but then we're paying more money than we have to give. And at that point, we just put ourselves on the clock to bankruptcy. And now nobody has a job. So it's not as simple as growing up as we millennials in particular, but I think even other folks have made it seem to be. These are situations that, as confirmed to me by older people that I've spoken to, even my mentor who's a director in a tech company, and other people, these are real life situations that these companies need to make. To wrap it up, what I've come to notice and learn, and I think is the only way to truly be secure in a job, and I'm not talking about, you got to network, you got to up your skills, get referrals, personal development, professional development. I'm not even just talking about those things. Those are very basic, I would say at this point, tips or whatever that people tend to throw out. For me, the only like actual concrete thing that you can try to, gain like actual job security is to get a job that's somehow government related. That's the only thing I see right now that makes sense. The government doesn't do layoffs. Government entities don't do layoffs. That's something that I think over the last handful of years since the pandemic really shook everything up, including the supply chain issues and everything, while everyone's been hit and everyone's been a little hit hard, whether you're in the military, DOD, Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, whatever it is, I personally have never heard of anyone being laid off. I don't think my mom has ever heard of anyone being laid off either. My mom definitely wasn't laid off, and she, ever since she got out the Navy, has been working for a government contractor. I don't think her job has ever been called into question, ever. I don't think that's something she actually had to worry about, right? So if you are doing work that is directly or indirectly tied to the government, and here's what I mean by that. When I say directly, I mean you're an actual government employee, meaning you're in the military, meaning you're employee of the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, whatever the case may be. Like, they sign your checks. Versus indirect is like you work for one of the big four consulting firms or something like that, but you work on the side of those firms that's like federal services or public services that focuses on providing consulting advice to said tech companies or government companies, right? Either way, if your work is based in the government side of things, then chances are you never will have to worry about being laid off. You will have a better chance of leaving simply because you want to leave. Because the government, as far as the manpower side of things, the main benefit to it is that once you are in, it's a long process, especially if it requires you to get a security clearance. So that's what makes it not necessarily up everybody's alley. As long of a process as it is, once you're in, which it can take a year plus to get into a government job, it takes just as long for them to get rid of you. That's the benefit. That's the number one benefit I've heard anyone tell me. Once you are in a government position as a full-time government employee, you do something that is like obscenely stupid that no one's ever heard of. Like, you do something that's so crazy, they have to get rid of you, right? You've messed up every chance you had. You don't get along with other people. That's so bad, whatever the case may be. It is such a long process. It takes like, I think at least a year or so for government entities to actually fire people. So it makes it a little bit harder for people in that space to reach a point where like, we're going to fire so-and-so. Because by the time they even make up their mind they want to do that and kick off that process, you can probably leave. Let's say you was about to get fired from the Department of Energy because you've been screwing up so bad. By the time that process even really gets started or they actually can terminate you, you probably can hop, skip, and jump over to the Department of Homeland Security for a job. And now they can't do nothing. The government doesn't do layoffs. One, from just what's been told to me, part of it is, technologically speaking, government entities are basically dinosaurs compared to even us regular everyday civilians. Their tech isn't all the way up to par, which means their workflows and processes are slower than even like the biggest tech companies in the world. So it takes them longer to get certain things done. The other part of it, again, is just like it takes a while to get into a government job or into a job that's like government affiliated, it takes just as, if not longer, for them to get rid of you if they actually want to get rid of you. And by that time, it's assuming like your networking is good or you know people in certain places where the case is, you can just hop, skip, and jump over to another department, a position in another department, and protect yourself. It doesn't, like, once you're in, you can move around, that whole thing. To me, that seems to be the only actual line of job security. The commercial side, if you can make it happen, it's quicker. That's the main trade-off. The government side or rather the commercial side, your Nikes, Adidas, the regular everyday companies, the tech firms, it's quicker. You truly can get a job within a week or two if you get with the right people. They like you. They're prioritizing you for whatever reason. That can actually happen. Pretty much the same thing. Like as quick as you can get in, you can get booted out. The government is more or less the same thing. It takes a while to get in. It takes them a while to make the decision or be willing to get rid of you. And again, that process it takes a while in itself. So to me, that seems to be what we are being nudged to, is whether it's going to the military or going to government work. It seems we're being nudged to, or if you've noticed, it would behoove you to consider government work of some kind. If you have the space and ability to entertain that option, it seems like a decent option. And until the economy is a little bit better, inflation's not as high. Inflation just increased by, I think it was 0.02% again, something like that, as I saw today. Yeah, it's still going up. And it was confirmed that it's higher than what I guess analysts or people expect it to be again. I hesitate to say until the economy gets back to where it was, or it gets back to a healthy place to where, you know, Americans in general actually feel comfortable in the commercial side of things, the private sector of work. The public sector or the government side of things might be, you know, the best way for us to go. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts, feedback, suggestions, everything like that in the comment section below, guys. I want to know what you guys think about this. If you have any your own theories about this type of thing, like how long do you think it'll take for the economy to get back to a place, more so the job market? Like, when do you think the job market will start to actually improve to the point where both the commercial and the government side are good places for a job? Because right now it seems like it's a seesaw, and right now it seems like the government side is a little more grounded, it's a little more firm, it's good, while the commercial side isn't looking so high. It's looking a little up in the air. So yeah, go and let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.